Hello students and welcome to the EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Shefali Nagpal from Bhagat Phool Singh Mahila Vishwavidyalaya. Today we are going to talk on the module Diaspora and Investment from the paper International Business Operations. Today, after studying this module, you will be able to learn what is free passage emigration, voluntary emigration, growing composition of labor diaspora, diaspora investment policy, economic and social benefits, diaspora and human rights. The term diaspora has been derived from the Greek words dia, which means through, and sperio, that means to scatter. The literal meaning of the diaspora is scattering or dispersal. Initially, the term was used to describe the Jewish communities living in the different parts of the world outside the Israel. Of late, however, the purview of diaspora has been broadened to refer to any population group settled abroad but maintaining close links with its homeland. Thus, diaspora can be defined as an ethnic minority community of the migrants' origin residing and acting in the host countries but maintaining the strong sentimental and material links with the countries of origin. More specifically, now the term generally is used to describe practically any population that is considered transnational. In the terms of Indian context, diaspora refers to the people who migrated from the territories that are currently within the borders of the Republic of India. It also refers to their descendants. The Indian diaspora could be characterized into two categories such as NRIs, which are non-resident Indians, and PIOs, the persons of Indian origin. The migration of Indian indentured labor began in 1834 and was officially ended in the year 1920. The chief importing countries of Indian laborers were the West Indies colonies, Fiji, South Africa, Mauritius, Malaysia, Ceylon, now which is known as Sri Lanka. The India indentured labor also to the East Africa such as Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania and many other countries. The majority of the immigrants were recruited from they were called as Hill Kuli district of the Chota Nagpur division and the Bankura, Briham and Bardhaman districts of Bengal Presidency. Bihar and eastern Uttar Pradesh were the leading areas in the north region. In South India, Trichinopoly, Madurai, Salem, Tanjore were the main recruiting districts. They from the West India, in the Bombay Presidency, Ahmednagar district was the main area of recruitment. Today, it is found that Indians have made all-round progress in these countries. Everywhere, Indian communities have become occupationally more diversified and they have been visible share of political power. In Mauritius, where the Indian constitute about 70% of the total population of the country, they have been dominating for a long period of time. In the recent past, in Guinea, Fiji, Trinidad, Tobago, and there have been the governments headed by the persons of Indian origin, and this has all made possible only due to the serenity and their hard work. They are now in the position not only to project India's image, but also to have partnership with India for the growth and its development. Kangani or mystery system. The Kangani system of recruitment was used to supply the South Indian laborers to Malaysia and Sri Lanka and the mystery system to Burma. The word Kangani is angelized from the Tamil word Kankani, meaning overseer and foreman. Under this system, a Kangani used to recruit the cooliers in India, paying them an advance for expenses. The mystery system was more or less similar to the Kangani system, except that the former was characterized by the gradation of the middlemen employers. As compared to the indentured system, coolies under this system were legally free. There was no contract and no fixed period of service. The Kangani system began early in the first quarter of the 19th century and continued until its final abolition in the year 1938. The mystery system began sometime in the third quarter of the 19th century. How many Indians migrated under these systems is not known. In all, probably 10 million Indians migrants moved back and forth between India and Burma, Ceylon and Malaysia. The majority of the Indian migrants were Tamil speaking Hindus, and the remainder were Muslims, Christians, and Sikhs. Indian migration to Southeast Asia also consisted of such groups as traders, shopkeepers, entrepreneurs, salesmen, clericals, and professional. In Malaysia, until 1957, this constituted about one-third of the total immigration. A somewhat similar situation existed in Burma, though the case of Ceylon, non-labor Indian immigration was substantially less. South Indian Chetar Hindus were the leading commercial and the business community in Burma and Malaysia. Free passage emigration. The third form of Indian migration within the British Empire was the passage of free emigration or immigration of trading caste and classes. The passage emigration was predominant in South Africa as well as in East African countries of Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda. Gujaratis and Punjabis migrated to East Africa following the opening up of the East Africa by the British and other European powers. The competition of the Ugandan railway offered new economic opportunities to the hinterland as well as the long railway route. The Indians, mainly Gujaratis, soon established themselves as shopkeepers. Subsequently, they monopolized the trade and commercial activities in the cities and the towns. The Indians were the merchants in the native produce, carters, tea masters, small contractors, moneylenders, quarry masters, dealers in lime, sand, stone, domestic firewood, barbers, saddlers, bootmakers, nurserymen, tailors, etc. These businessmen were highly successful and quite a few of them rose to the prominence. The success of the diasporic communities, in fact, lead to the conflict with the local population. The future of India became uncertain. A large number of Indians from East Africa migrated to Britain, Canada, US, aptly described as twice migrants, and many of them are now settled in these countries. The remaining Indians in the East Africa continue to thrive in business and professions. Voluntary emigration to the Western societies. The large-scale Indian immigration into the advanced industrial societies of Europe and North America began in the last 60s. Though the history of the Indian migration goes back to the early years of 20th century in North America and 19th century in Britain. The people who migrated to these regions were of highly educated professionals and skilled or semi-skilled industrial workers. Early Indian migrants who went to settle down in Britain and North America were mainly Sikhs. Sikhs still constitute the single largest ethnic group in Britain, Canada, and the US, although now more and more non-Sikhs are migrating. There are about 5 million people of Indian origin in Europe, North America, and Oceania. In the US, the majority of the Indians are educated professionals, scientists, engineers, doctors, teachers, etc. In the Britain and Canada, Indian communities are occupationally more diversified and relatively less well off. It is evident that the Western societies are also not free from racial discriminations and prejudices against the ethnic minorities and migrants. It is argued that when the group becomes visible phenomena, it can face some sort of discrimination from the host culture. It could be due to the conflict or completion with the national population. Whenever there are economic crises, a group of host community may show non-appreciation and discrimination towards the other group. Indians in the Europe and North America have also been the victims of such discrimination time and again. Above all, Indian communities are in all these countries have begun to exert political influence in varying degrees. In the UK, 4 members of the House of Commons and 11 members of the House of Lords are of Indian origin. In Canada, Ujjwal Singh rose to become the Premier of the British Columbia for a couple of years. Indians are well settled in these countries and are living by and large peacefully. They are, however, very conscious of their distinct entity and they try to preserve it. Indian labor diaspora in West Asia. The fifth and the final patron consists of Indian labor migration to West Asia. This migration patterns differ from the previous ones in that all the migrants are generally contract workers and are not allowed to settle permanently in the countries of their destination. But this was not always the case, as will be clear from the following. India has a trade and cultural relations with the Persian Gulf region since antiquity. However, there is a evidence of Indian settlement in the region only since the 6th century. Small communities of Indian traders called Baniyas existed in the present-day Iraq, Iran, Oman, Yemen, and Saudi Arabia in the 17th and 18th centuries. When the region came under the British influence in the 19th century, Indian merchant communities flourished in the number of the towns in the Gulf countries. Indians served as the bankers, importers and exporters, custom farmers, agent for the local merchants, government contractors, financiers, and many more. In the early 70s, it was observed that due to the spurt in the oil prices, some oil-producing countries of the West Asia have started investing in infrastructure development in a big way that created a huge demand for different categories of labor. As a result, migrant workers from South Asia joined the labor market predominantly in the Gulf countries such as Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, and many more. Since mid-1980s, it was noticed that the horizon of the migration was expanded and the migrant workers began to migrate to the newly industrialized countries in Southeast Asia and East Asia, such as the Republic of Korea, Malaysia, and Singapore. It was noted that they faced a shortage of labor and local workers were reluctant to take up the so-called 3D jobs that were dangerous, dirty, and degraded. The number of the migrant workers show an increase after the 1990s following the liberalization of the overseas travel by the government. The majority of the migrant workers from South Asia constitute semi-skilled and unskilled manpower. It is also observed overwhelming majority of the migrant workers are found to be the male from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nepal. While in the case of Sri Lanka only, women migrant workers constitute majority. Women are found to be more vulnerable to all kind of exploitation in comparison to their male counterparts. Their human rights need to be protected along with their male counterparts. Growing composition of labor diaspora in the Gulf. It was noted that the percentage of the expatriate workers in the GCC countries grew from 22.9% in 1975 to 38.5% in the year 2002 and then to 48.1% of the total population of 48.1 million GCC residents. Reliance on foreign labor has resulted in expatriates currently constituting 88% of the workforce in UAE, 83% in Qatar, 81% in Kuwait, 72% in Saudi Arabia, 55% in Bahrain, and 54% in Oman. However, the composition of expatriate workers has changed periodically. If the current trend continues, it is projected that number of the migrant workers would grow by another 1 million. It is equally likely that the number of the non-Gulf Arab workers in GCC states will diminish. The presence of the Asian workers would likely to grow further. The proportion of non-citizens in the Gulf has steadily increased during the last 4 decades which is contrary to the plans and desires of the Gulf countries. It is revealed by the data that the proportion of the non-national vary from country to country, ranging from 32% in Saudi Arabia to 88.5% in United Arab Emirates. Now let us study the diaspora investment policy. The potential of the Indian diaspora was not realized by the Indian government in the early period of the post-India's independence. It was noticed that the NRI's contribution in the development of India was realized after 70s. Consequently, and the Indian government began adopting the policy and introducing some schemes to increase the NRI involvement in India. As rightly stated by Shri C.S. Bhatt, that the liberalization and the new industrial policy in 1970 is in fact sought involvement of overseas Indians in investing both in terms of the capital and technology. The NRIs were encouraged to invest in India through certain attractive schemes such as Resurgent Indian Bond, which are commonly known as RIBs, and they were welcome to launch industrial enterprise along with the transfer of technology. Diaspora investment policy. It is evident that non-resident Indians and people of Indian origin have transferred knowledge and expertise that result into positive change in several sectors. On account of India's foreign exchange reserves and massive entrepreneurial energy has also led to the rise of India's information technology and IT-enabled services sectors in India, with the remittance flows of around US $71 billion and NRI deposit worth rupees $513 million, the Indian diaspora has always played an important role in adding India's national income and wealth, thereby being actively involved in the country's development and strategic decision making. The Indian government has realized their significance and is now moving ahead in the direction to tap productive investment from the overseas Indians in order to engage them as long as partners in India's growth process. These flows and investment in the fact play a significant role for the national growth and development in our country. The government has recently revised diaspora policy with the objective to tap the technical expertise from the Indian diaspora for India's growth and development. Their involvement in India's signature programs, including cleaning of Ganga River, Swachh Bharat, etc., are considered to be the vital for the progress of their homeland. The new policy is in fact looking at the Indian diaspora in a new perspective. It is realized that their contribution in terms of time, expertise and investment in all sectors of Indian economy and society are crucial for India. It is evident that the diaspora provide important bridge between home and host societies by building transnational networks. These networks can serve the purpose of not only emotional and familial ties for diaspora, but also cultural, social and economic interest of India. Diaspora and financial flows. The flow of funds from the migrant workers back to their families in their home country is an important source of income in many developing economies. International migration from the developing countries has increased significantly during the last 2 decades. Remittances sent by the migrant workers contribute significantly in foreign exchange earning and gross domestic product growth of the nations. They also enhance economic betterment of migrants' family. They are considered to be the engine of economic growth for many developing countries like India. Remittances sent through the informal channels are considerable in many developing countries such as Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Philippines, and Sudan. The true value of the remittances is likely to be much higher, as only a portion of total remittances flow through the official channels. Migration empowers migrant workers in terms of the economic independence and higher self-esteem. Migration has made a significant contribution in terms of earning foreign exchange enhancing migrant skills, and reducing unemployment and underemployment in the labor sending countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. In the year 2010, the flow of international remittances to the developing countries stood at $325 billion. Those rose to $406 billion in the year 2012, a growth of 6.5% over the previous year. These flows rose 8% in the year 2013 and to 10% in the year 2014 and are expected to reach 534 billions in the year 2015. India is the world's largest remittance recipient country in the world. According to the largest information, it was estimated to be around $71 billion. It was estimated to be less than $2 billion in the year 2000, in the year 1970-71, which rose to more than $2 billion in the year 1980-81. Throughout 80s, annual inflows remained more than $2 billion. But in the 90s, a considerable rise in the annual inflows of remittances, as shown in the figure. At the turn of the century, remittances rose to more than $12 billion in the year 2000 and 2001. Remittances further went to $55 billion in the year 2009-10 and finally rose to $71 billion till the recent past. So, there is a substantial growth in the remittance flows during the last 2 decades. Due to this huge inflow of remittances, a lot of developmental activities are going on in India. This could be observed both at the micro as well as the macro levels. Now let us understand the economic and the social benefits of diaspora. Diaspora from India is not only helping to reduce the situation of unemployment, but also earn foreign exchange. This migration has also reduced poverty and brought prosperity in migrating regions. The Gulf money has also improved the income level of the migrants' household considerably. This rising income level has improved the consumption, investment, and saving patterns in migrating areas. Having worked in the Gulf, they become more skilled. Hence, they are considered economic assets. Expatriate workers are also the backbone of the Gulf economy and society. Indian diasporas are not only economically beneficial to the India, but also projecting country's image abroad in the right perspective. In addition to the economic remittances, they also bring social remittance to the homeland. There is a visible change in the attitude towards the education and social mobility of migrant families. A family which was looked down in the past is now welcomed in the social functions. A poverty-stricken and isolated villages are suddenly becoming prosperous. The sizable proportions of the houseless population is now having own houses. These observations are made on the basis of common findings of some of the studies done by the scholars. Now let us also study about the human rights of the diasporic people. It is witnessed that the basic right of Indian diasporas are violated many times, despite their immense contribution to the home and the host countries. This is far worse in the countries that have a non-democratic setup or tradition. Often, there are reports of incidents of racial discrimination and human right violation against the member of the diaspora Indian community. Their rights to conserve or practice their own culture have been challenged, if not, then denied. They are being denied the basic human right of equality, social justice, and human dignity in the places like Fiji, Malaysia, Caribbean, Gulf countries, and even in some Western countries which have become their homes. It is interesting to note that diaspora communities make a significant contribution to both homes as well as the host countries. Yet their basic rights are not ensured in both the countries. Their interests are not properly addressed either by the legal framework or by the trade unions, and their welfare is not sufficiently secured in the society. in contrast to the fact that none of the government in South Asian countries has rectified ILO conventions. Individual states have taken alternative measures such as bilateral agreements, implementation of the model contracts, and establishing institutions to define even partially migrant worker rights. Moreover, the 1990 Convention on the Rights of the Migrant Workers has not been ratified by any major countries of the world. An early ratification of these conventions by these countries will represent an initial step to improve the situation of diaspora workers and their rights. By doing so, it would not be only in the interest of diaspora labor, but also in the interest of both host as well as the home country, as they would become more productive and motivated human capital. So students, let us now summarize what we have learned in this module. We now conclude by saying that the Indian diaspora is a spread throughout the globe. It is so widespread that the sun never sets on Indian diaspora, like that of the British Empire. Currently, it is estimated to be around 25 to 30 million, which would be the world's second largest diasporas next to China. They have characterized as far more diverse as compared to the Chinese diaspora. These communities are in fact the brand ambassadors of India, who are projecting the nation's image wherever they are living. It is also witnessed that India gets economic and strategic benefits due to their presence worldwide. India receives enormous remittances due to the large number of diaspora around the world. The Gulf is one of the regions wherefrom the huge amount of remittances come to India every year. Kerala is one of the Indian states that receives substantial amount of remittances. India has still maintained a first position in the world in terms of receiving remittances from the abroad. The effect of financial inflow and the remittances in the labor sending countries are noticeable in terms of reducing poverty, unemployment, and many other factors. It is witnessed that these inflows have increased consumption level, investment, and purchasing power of the migrants' family. They have also become the major source of remittances and foreign exchange of India. The significance of the remittances has been well understood by the Indian government and has started giving importance to them. In order to channelize the affairs of the Indian abroad, the new ministry named Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs, which was created in 2004. Since then, this ministry is working in order to address the issues pertaining to the diasporic community and is engaged in mutual benefits of the interests.